here.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So, oh, just a second. Okay, now we're live. So there's a little bit of a hang up. Yes. So thank you for joining us today. Uh, just to understand a little bit more, sort of about how you are, or how Beyond CAD came to be. Can you share maybe a little bit about your background in terms of where you started your career as a civil engineer and sort of how that started to lead you on the path that you are on today?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give a background and feel free to ask questions along the way. But it actually starts, if you really want to go back, it starts back to the Ninja Turtles. So I had four brothers, and well, there were four of us, and I wanted to be Donatello, and he was the engineer or the inventor. So I told my dad I wanted to be an inventor, and he said, in the real world, that's an engineer. So fast forward, a decade or so, and I went to school for civil engineering at UNLV, and took a while, but eventually graduated, started my career with Nevada Department of Transportation. And it wasn't more than a few months into my job, my career, that I realized that maybe I had chosen the wrong career path. I'm more of a creative person, and engineering is a lot of rules, a lot of structure, and a lot of sitting in a cubicle. And so I realized that it wasn't for me, but luckily around the same time, I also started doing some visualization for some of the project managers. I'd dabbled in SketchUp and Revit, InfraWorks, and so I started using these tools to do some renderings for them for different projects, and they really liked what I was doing. It was crude. It was crude because it was 10 years ago, and it was crude because I didn't know what I was doing. But they would say things like, "Wow, this is amazing. We used to pay $40,000 for this," and I just spent a couple of weeks doing that, and so the gears started turning that maybe money could be made doing visualization and rendering in transportation and civil engineering. And so I stuck around in the industry long enough to get my license, which was 4 years after. So I graduated in 2010. 2014, I worked for an engineering firm for a year, and then I got my engineering license and kind of left that world and started a visualization company called CivilFX, where we were providing visualization, focusing on civil and transportation projects. That was slow for a while, but eventually we started getting some major infrastructure freeway projects. One of the biggest one to note was Project Neon. That was kind of our first big one, which was, to this day, it's still the biggest infrastructure project in Nevada's history. It's over $1 billion. And so when we got that contract, I had a decent budget, and I was like, and I went to the team and I was like, you know what? And I thought about this for a while. Like I'd played racing games, I'd see these things. I'm like, why do we just make renderings of this freeway? Like, why can't we use gaming technology and make this interactive? And so I took that idea to the project team. They didn't have a clue what I was saying, and they were just like, you probably don't know what you're doing, but whatever. And so I did this, and it took a while. I had to actually, one side tangent on that. My oldest brother is a gaming programmer, and so I've kind of grown up watching him work on Command and Conquer. He worked for Westwood Studios. He worked for EA, all these different companies, and his company Petroglyph in Las Vegas went out of business at the same time, and so there were all these programmers that didn't have jobs in Vegas, and there was no other video game company, and so I hired them as contractors to help me take Project Neon and make it into an interactive visualization using Unity and 3ds Max and SketchUp. Anyway, we were able to pull it off, and not only did it work, but it was this huge success. We did VR, we did a driving simulator, we were on the news, and so we made the project managers look really good. And so that kind of was the catalyst for CivilFX, and we ended up doing a lot more of these interactive visualizations, a lot for NDOT. Again, I'd worked there before, I knew a lot of the people there, and then we started branching into other states. I started building up a team, and long story short, 6 years later, I sold CivilFX to a company called Parametrics, and we had 10 employees. 7 of them went with Parametrics. Me and 2 others went to my new company, Beyond CAD, where we were going to. The plan was and is today to make better visualization tools, because that complex Unity 3ds Max workflow that we were doing with CivilFX, it's necessary because there aren't better visualization tools. So that kind of leads us today. Now we have Beyond CAD. We have Beyond CAD and Beyond Typicals, two applications. They're both new, but they're now available. We're starting to gain users and deal with all the problems that come with a software publishing company.
Yeah, and so before we dive into Beyond CAD and Beyond Typicals, just to go back to Project Neon, when you were bringing programmers on board, were they scratching their head and saying, well, wait, this isn't really a video game, but you want to use a game engine? Was there any, curiosity of why you had interest in a game engine, or did they get it immediately?
No, there was a disconnect because there's the video game world and there was the civil world, and how do we bridge that? Like there are these CAD programs that they'd never heard of, and it's how do we get the geometry out of them and into Unity. Luckily, one of the programmers I was working with was both a licensed civil engineer and a Unity programmer, and so he had some talents to kind of bridge that. And but my brother and his best friend that he still works with to this day, they all worked for me. And it's funny because my brother told me all along when I was a kid, like because I've always had ideas, and he's like, you're going to want to learn programming. All the things that you want to do in life, you're going to have to learn programming. I never did, but I've hired my brother. I've hired his daughter, his son-in-law. And so, yeah, we just kind of built this team of programmers and artists and just solved one problem at a time. And eventually, the bar is lower for visualization and transportation than it is for a video game, and the budget is smaller. And so if you looked at it from a video game perspective, you would see all the flaws. But when you're looking at that for a minute and 30 seconds on the news, you're not going to see the car that's floating this much above the road. You're not going to see the tree that's misplaced, because it's not like Grand Theft Auto where the people are exploring that for hours and hours. So we solve the problems in so much as to deliver it and keep our clients happy.
And what does a game engine enable your projects and your company to do that you can't do with 3ds Max or an Adobe suite? What is it about the game engine that makes a difference, or what changes?
Yeah, in the industry of visualization and civil and transportation, it has been a 3ds Max V-Ray centric world for a long time, and in some areas it still is. And in 2018, I actually ended up hiring a project manager. Again, with Civil FX, I'm doing a visualization company where I don't know visualization. I'm not an artist. I'm not a programmer. I'm just kind of gathering talent around me. So in 2018, there was one competitor in all of Nevada that did what I do, and I kind of networked with him, took him out to lunch eventually I just gave him an offer. I was like, Wayne, come work for me and we'll kind of take over the world. And so Wayne came and joined me, and he had been doing the 3ds Max V-Ray thing since the 90s. And so when he came to me, I was like, hey, with Civil FX, it's gonna be different. We're leaning in on the real-time world. And he was really resistant to that because he's like, okay, I know V-Ray, it's going to be better quality, and I know how to set up cameras, and I know how to do all these things. And I'm like, yes, but like there's just so many trade-offs where this is going to be better. And it took him a while, but within a year or two, he's just like, I never want to do V-Ray again, because in that world, like you would do a draft render, which would take a week with a render farm if you were lucky enough to have one, and then the client would say, oh, that sign change, we need that to change. And then you got to render it out for a week again. Whereas real time, it's real time. And if you watch Twitch, that quality coming out of Forza Horizon 5, that is way better than what you're going to get with probably V-Ray in those things. So the technology has advanced so much that you can get 90% of the quality at just a fraction of the time. And so with Civil FX, we leaned all in on that. And then we started building a team around interactive visualization. And that was our goal. Let's build a interactive, optimized 3D world. And the client's going to want image and video renders. We can do that easily. But we can also do VR and simulators and interactive touchscreens. There's an interactive touchscreen that we would take to public meetings. So we saw the advantages of real-time technology and leaned in on that. And I think that's kind of what separated us at the time.
Mm. And just to touch a little bit more on one of those challenges that you just mentioned that it helps solve is if I'm an artist working in 3ds Max and I am making a render of an exterior of a building, that can take up to a week to possibly render out just one single image. And then if the project manager says, "Hey, that's great, but we need to remove some trees or we need to add something," um, maybe add some cars or change the camera just a little bit, that means I've got to redo that render and another week is gone. Is that sort of what happens in a traditional 3ds Max pipeline?
Absolutely, yeah, and you can mitigate that somewhat with doing really low resolution draft renders or trying to show previs or wireframe, but it's just in real time you just almost do away with that entire problem.
Hmm. And then so I can move the camera and instantly it will update and I can produce a new render. But that's just sort of the beginning, because if I'm using 3ds Max and I want to visualize traffic in real time, is that even possible with 3ds Max? Or making it interactive where I can, tap on a floor and get more information about the utilities or electricity.
Yeah, I mean, 3ds Max has its place still as a 3D modeling platform, but just the real-time technology has gotten so good that the industry has changed. It's changed for architecture. It's changed for product visualization. You'll see now, shoes or headphones, like they just render that stuff in real time as well. And it's changing slower, but eventually it will change for the movie industry. They're still doing render farms, Pixar or Marvel or whatever, but you're seeing them start to embrace, like if you've watched behind the scenes of The Mandalorian, they're using Unreal Engine backplates or whatever to replace green screens, and that those sorts of things are going to change that industry as well. And so it's just an improvement of technology, and more people, I think, are seeing that and embracing that.
So yeah, so game engines open up a wide array of opportunities with just using a single game engine platform. So how is Beyond CAD now using game engines in some of the products that you're developing?
Sure. So Beyond CAD is built on Unreal Engine. There are a few reasons why we chose Unreal Engine over Unity when we decided to do this. One of them is we received a mega grant from Unreal Engine, so that's always, getting bought and paid for is always useful. So I had seen visualization engines in architecture and what they could do, and basically they're an engine just like Unity or Unreal. It's just simplified. They add an asset library and they make it so that a non-artist, non-visualizer can visualize their building or whatever, their SketchUp file. And so I wanted to do the same thing for civil and transportation with Beyond CAD. And so we're proudly using Unreal Engine, but we are making it with tools and a user interface and assets in a way where an engineer can take it and do it for themselves. And sometimes I'll talk to like visualization teams that do what we do, and they start getting really, really technical with me, like, can you customize the code, or can you export to Unreal Engine, or can you do these things? And usually my answer to them is, like, this tool isn't for you. Like, just go use Unreal Engine. Like, Unreal Engine can do everything Beyond CAD can do and more. We're just making this for people that can't use Unreal Engine, because most engineers don't have the time to learn that and to build up an asset library and to build the civil FX. So we are trying to use that real-time gaming technology and make it simple and functional enough that the engineers and the CAD designers can use it themselves to visualize their own civil and transportation projects.
Yeah, so let's say I'm an engineer and I am using Beyond CAD software. What am I trying to do within that software? Or what are maybe some examples of how it's been used in the past?
Sure. So one thing to note about Beyond CAD is it doesn't do any of the modeling itself. And there are tools out there in our industry like InfoWorks and Concept Station where they kind of do some of the infrastructure modeling for you, but Beyond CAD doesn't do any of that. It's the same model as those architectural engines like Lumion and Twinmotion, where the modeling is done somewhere else. In the architectural world, it's done in Revit or SketchUp primarily. In our world, it's done in Civil 3D, InfoWorks, InRoads, OpenRoads. So the modeling, the CAD designing is done somewhere else. they save the file, and then in Beyond CAD, they import that file. And then within Beyond CAD, they can add textures. So now it's getting more realistic. They can add, and then you have sky, environment, lighting. And then we have an asset library of over 1,500 assets where they can start adding trees and people and buildings, adding context. And then we have an advanced traffic system so that you can add traffic. That includes vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, rail, and you can set up intersection controllers so the cars are stopping. And so you go from a wireframe model in CAD, that's the way it's been done for a long time. That's how they produce plans. But you go from that wireframe model that few people would understand what it is to basically turning it into a video game with Beyond CAD. And then from there, you can do an interactive experience where you're navigating using our UI and set up cameras, where you can render out image and video renders. We're going to have VR support soon. So that's the goal, is to communicate those design files into Beyond CAD and out of it into renders or other visual experiences.
And why are some of those real-time aspects like traffic so important for engineers? I mean, why when I'm using Beyond CAD, why am I spending time adding like a traffic simulation or cars moving down the road to my project?
Yeah, the goal of traffic typically is to not be noticed. So what you're trying to do when you're communicating a project is the project should be the star of the show. And that's what you're trying to communicate. Okay, this freeway is going down and it's going to have this new lane and then it's going to go under this bridge. And you want the public to understand that. That's primarily the industry that we're in. And so if the traffic is not doing what people would expect it to do from real world or from video games or from movies or whatever they expect it to, then it's going to be really distracting. And I've lived in that world, car paths where the cars just keep going and they never stop, or maybe you don't even have traffic and the cars are all just stopped there, or you don't have any traffic. Those things are going to be really distracting. And so if we can add somewhat realistic traffic fairly quickly, then it kind of bridges that gap in the public's mind of, okay, now I'm looking at something that's real. I can anticipate being there. And so that the technology is good enough where we can make a traffic system, they can place it in Beyond CAD, and we can kind of fool the public into seeing, okay, this is how traffic should really behave in that scenario.
So is one of the primary uses to communicate certain visuals and certain features to the public and other stakeholders. This is a project we're currently involved in, and this is how it's going to look once it's finished. Is that one of the key uses of the software?
Yeah, you're basically trying to communicate and tell the story of the project. And there are some projects that are, taxpayer funded, where they have requirements to do public outreach. They have to have public meetings. They have to go on the news. And so more and more of those public outreach budgets, like with Project Neon, they have a visualization line item where they say you need to actually visually render what this is going to be. And in the past, you could just make an image render and print it out for the public meeting and call it good. But now it's just more and more demanded and expected that it can be interactive, and it should be. It's more affordable. It's easier to do. And so that's usually the world we live in, is trying to communicate complex projects in a simple way. I mean, if I showed you a plan set for a freeway, like the general public would probably have trouble even understanding what they're looking at. Like, there's just so many lines. It's so confusing. And that's the competition that we're facing, is you go to a public meeting and they have these big roll plots printed out of, top-down aerial views of this is the road. And the complex ones, the spaghetti bowls, like you can't even tell if the bridge is going over or under. And so to go from that to basically, Grand Theft Auto or Forza, like that's just so appealing for these project managers. We're giving them tools where they can more easily communicate their projects.
And so how does a project manager access Beyond CAD? Do they have to download it, or how do we go about accessing this application?
I guess to get technical, the project manager wouldn't typically be using Beyond CAD. It would be like the CAD design team, the ones making the 3D models. But if they were going to use Beyond CAD, they would. Right now, you go to our website and you can download our launcher, and then you can install it. It's like a 60 gigabyte install. and then assuming that it's not blocked by your firewall, then hopefully, and assuming that you have a good GPU, hopefully you can launch it and run it. We ran into a lot of issues with that a few months ago when we did our public launch. And so luckily, both of our applications are now available in the Epic Games Store and the Epic Games Launcher. So that seems, the download and distribution seems to be a lot better. But yeah, this is a PC, these are both PC applications, and you do need to have good hardware requirements and some technical savvy to get going.
Now, as you know, we are a pixel streaming company. So are you possibly considering a web-based version of Beyond CAD?
Yes, I mean, we're not just considering, we are testing it out. And I've long thought about this solution, even back in the Unity days when we were with Civil FX. I mean, there were times when we would make these really cool interactive models, like with Project Neon and similar projects. We would make, billion-dollar system-to-system interchanges, and basically they would just like get the image and video renders and call it a day. And I'm just like, are you kidding? Like, this is interactive. We have this full model. Like, use it at every meeting you go to. Like, this is Vegas. They would be going to meetings with all these casinos, and like, so what I would do is I would use my own money to buy them a gaming laptop. I would install the application, the exe file on there, and then they would go and take that to these meetings, and then they just saw how powerful that is. And so for a long time, I've been like, man, if we could just send a link to the project manager and they could just click on it and do it on a live demo right there, or they could forward it to other stakeholders, like that's the goal. And so now with Unreal Engine and pixel streaming and even what you guys, Quentin, are offering with Eagle 3D streaming, that is becoming a reality. And so it's not just in the future we're going to be able to do this. It's like, no, we're trying this right now. We spend so much time building these interactive 3D worlds and making them look realistic and express and communicate the project. Like, being able to make them so that you can just click a link and view them in real time. That's been my dream and goal for a long time, and it's coming sooner rather than later.
And just to kind of touch on maybe some things that it could help with people who have Unreal Engine applications and maybe wondering, well, what is pixel streaming? Why would I use it? What are some of the potential challenges it could help you solve?
There's so much friction right now for our users. They have to download and install a 60 gigabyte file. So the file size, the internet speed, that's an issue. Where you're going to save the file, that's an issue. Is the firewall going to block it, either on download or on install? That's an issue. And then the GPU requirements, like, do they have a computer with a 3080 RTX graphics card? That would be really nice. And a lot of them don't. Like, in the gaming world, when someone's on Steam, they know they have the computer to run that stuff. But in our world, these are people that aren't familiar with visualization. They might not have a GPU that can run this. And so that's a short list of the things, the friction that we face. And so by using pixel streaming, by using cloud GPU technology, we're taking that friction off the shoulders of our users. We don't want them to have that friction. We want them to happily pay money and keep paying every month so that they can be happy and that we can be making money. So we can take that friction and put it on pixel streaming, put it on Eagle 3D and other streaming platforms, so that, because you guys are in the business of of handling that friction and making it better. And so it's still a PC application. It still needs gaming requirements, but that's being done somewhere else in a way that my users and even I, to some extent, don't have to worry about as much. And even something like updates, like, we're always trying to update, and then we got to push the update. We got to communicate that. But in the GPU world that we're hopefully going to, it's like Chrome. Like, it's probably on a new version, but you don't know. Like, it was just updated, and the next time you went there, it was the latest version. So there's just so much friction, and I'm excited for the future of cloud streaming, where that friction is being handled by professionals and not by our users that I'm just hoping will use my software.
Yeah, very, very well said. And speaking of the future, so what is on the plate upcoming for Beyond CAD? What do you guys? What's the roadmap, or what are you planning on doing next?
Yeah, I mean, we're really focused on making our apps better, making them more accessible to our users, and growing our user base so that we can just continually improve. With Beyond CAD, we're going to shoot for a version 2 launch late this year. The biggest change is going to be upgrading to Unreal 5. So that's a goal there. And then our other application, Beyond Typicals, actually it was just supposed to be a feature within Beyond CAD, but we eventually split it out because it didn't really need to be within Beyond CAD. It could be a standalone application. And we've received so much positive feedback from that we're really trying to push Beyond Typicals. So Beyond CAD, you have to have CAD files, you import them. It's kind of a technical, I mean, engineers can do it, but it still takes a lot of training and practice to know how to do it. Beyond Typicals, in our industry or in urban planning and design, you can imagine like a downtown corridor in Chicago, and they have buildings on either side, and they have 4 lanes, and they're like, you know what, we want to make it more modernized and friendly for pedestrians. Let's remove 2 of the lanes, add more parking, bigger sidewalks, trees. With Beyond Typicals, you can do that in minutes using 3D drag and drop sections, obviously Unreal Engine powered. And so we're putting a lot of focus on Beyond Typicals. We're going to eventually split that out into a light and pro version, hopefully this summer. So by the end of this year, we're going to have a full suite of products on our website that are going to be available for civil and transportation engineers looking to visualize their projects. So we're doing that now and just continuing to move in that path.
So you hit the ground running and you are just full steam ahead. Well, Sam, thank you very, very much for taking the time to share a little bit more about what Beyond CAD is working on and about your history and how everything came together. If anyone would like to learn more, how should they learn more about you?
I invite everyone to connect with me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Sam Lytle, Lytle. You can also go to our website, beyondcad.com, and you can even email me, sam@beyondcad.com.
Boom. Sam, thank you again for being on our show. I'm Quentin Anderson with Real Time Talk with Eagle 3D Streaming, and we will catch you on the next show. Sam, thank you very much.